All right, all right, all right, all right. Um, Welcome to the stream, everyone. Hope you guys are doing good today. My name's Josh Herman. I'm the Chief Creative Officer here at Gnomon. Today we're going to be doing a little art jam. On the previous stream, I had kind of shown this project off, and there was a good amount of interest in it. So I wanted to actually, instead of doing what we've kind of been doing, which has been a lot of sculpting and concepting from scratch and stuff like that, I wanted to jump into a little bit more modeling stuff today and kind of what my process would be or how I would start approaching bringing a character like this to the next level once you've kind of got your sketch. Um, and I wanted, in the previous stream, I had kind of talked about, having this be something that would be like a life size, quote unquote, Jaeger or, uh, something like that. And like you can see, the previous things all popped up, but this little guy here is roughly the size of what a person would be. Like imagine, Pacific Rim style, that there'd be something inside, a person or people inside driving this. So the scale of this is going to be really large. So that was why I actually want to start. I kind of just want to start modeling this and go from there. I think that'll be a more interesting process to get into and just start pushing this forward. So we're going to do that today. If you've never seen an art jam before, especially for people on YouTube or people on Facebook, hello. Hope you guys are doing well. John Quest, Octavian, hope you guys are all doing well. Nice to see you today. Um, if you've never seen an art jam before, basically we're going to hang out for 3 hours. We're going to work on some projects. We're going to talk about industry things. We're going to talk about process. And if you guys have any questions about what I'm working on, please feel free to ask those. And of course, if you have any questions about Gnomon, about Gnomon's programs, offerings, alumni, anything like that, feel free to ask those as well. And I'll be happy to help. So since we're obviously starting off in ZBrush today, I'm going to hide this little guy here. Make sure, let's see. Before I jump into working, making sure that everything on the streams is looking and sounding good, that everything is working. Right. All right. Cool. Looks like everything's working. Perfect. Well, let's get into it. So today I'm not going to focus on the whole character at one time. I'm going to focus on the kind of the torso bit here. So I'm going to hide these arms. I'm going to hide these legs. I also did a really quick version of a sword. Again, this is very simple, so everything here is going to have to be designed out a little bit further. But uh, since there's a clear enough idea of what it should look like, it's not really an issue for me to keep going on this, right? To keep working on it in Maya. I get a lot of questions about how I would do something for a final model and what I would do, and I find that for me, trying to make a model that you want to be a final, nicely quadded out model that you can put really good UVs on, and is more of like a high-res cinematic model or a film model. Um, my opinion is I like to get that in Maya as quick as possible and get it to that point. And then if I'm going to finalize details, I'll finalize it on the final model, not which I would. Whereas if I was going in a game scenario and this was going to be lower poly, I would spend a lot more time in ZBrush and finalizing details there. So there's kind of a little bit of a different approach. So I'm going to work on these shoulders a little bit. Well, maybe not the shoulders. I might just kind of focus on this chest piece, right? We'll focus on the torso and this head, and we'll get this all out. But I am going to merge a couple of these things together. So first what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into each of these. You see this is this headpiece. I can open up these folders. What I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to merge visible on this. And then I'll just create another subtool up here. So I'm going to do that the same way. I'm going to go to the chest, which I have apparently hidden multiple pieces in here. There we go. I'm going to merge all this together. And then we'll go ahead and we'll do that on the shoulders. I have some sort of mechanics in here as well that I won't really be focusing on today. Again, we're going to get into like to how I would take my model from ZBrush and start getting into the real hard surface process on in Maya and kind of doing that. Sorry, I'm just kind of going to go over here. I'm going to append some of these items together. This is more or less just making a simpler export file for me. So now these are all one subtool. Now one thing here is that this is a total points of 5.5 million polygons. I don't need it to be that heavy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into each one of these and I'm going to go to Z plugin, decimation master. I'm actually going to kick this over to the left here. Decimation master. If you've never used decimation master, it's really pretty simple. You're going to basically go into the steps that they have here. So they have 1, 2, 3. So first you're going to see if you want to freeze your borders, keep your UVs, or keep your UVs in, or keep and use your poly paint. We don't have that. Step 2 is you're going to pre-process current or all. Just for sake of the stream, I'm going to do them current, so it goes piece by piece. You can do it all, but it'll spend a lot more time. So we're going to hit current on this. You'll watch it say it's going to analyze the mesh. And then it's going to hit this little orange bar that's going to go across the top. When that's done, we'll be able to decimate this. What decimation is, in case you aren't aware, is it's kind of like, how would I say? It's kind of like optimization as much as you can, right? It'll destroy the mesh as far as meaning it will like triangulate it. It won't really be something you want to sculpt on, but it is something that makes it so that other programs can read it. ZBrush is really good, probably the best in the business at handling really high poly count numbers. Traditional 3D packages typically are not. So we want to get this down to, instead of millions of polygons, we maybe want to have 100,000 polygons. We want to get this down considerably. So I'm going to solo this, and I'm going to have this percentage of decimation. Now you can do it by percentage, which is kind of cut it by a percent, or you can do thousands of polys or points. I like to use thousands of polys, and I'm going to hit 50,000 polys here. You can see that adjusts everything else, so that we're going to take it just under 1%, and then I'm going to hit decimate, and you'll see it decimated it. So right now, this is what our polygon looks like from this before to this. Now, since this is not a mesh that really needs to have a ton of detail in it, right? All I'm really looking for is kind of where these lines are. Since this sculpt isn't perfect, it's not something that I need to make one for one. We don't need to. I don't need to worry about making all of those lines perfect in this decimation. I might go back to 100,000 and hit decimate current and see if that does a major improvement. I'd say it gives a little bit of an improvement. We'll run with that. And as you see, that's actually 50,000 points here. And to me, that's going to be fine. So now I'm going to unsolo that. I'm going to do that to the rest of these two pieces here. So we're going to do it to these shoulder pads. I'm going to hit pre-process current. You're going to watch that orange bar going across the top. When that's done, we'll hit this again. So we'll say like maybe this might only need to be 20,000 polys. That maybe is a little low, as you can tell. I want it to keep the information, but I don't want it to get too expensive. So you can see it's working to keep those panel lines and those cut lines there. That's exactly what I want, right? And then I'm going to go on to the next one. I'm going to go to this chest piece. Each one of these is multiple pieces, as you'll see. I don't really care about that right now. What I really want is to get this just in so I can start working on it. So this is about 2 million polys. We're going to do the same thing, rinse and repeat, pre-process the current thing, and then we're going to decimate current. So while that's working, we're going to keep going. So we will be jumping into Maya in a second. This is currently ZBrush. Looks like we got a question from SK Ezos. I believe you were here last week. Nice to see you again. You were doing a character design for AAA games. What poly count should you go for? It's a hero character in a game cinematic. That's a good question. I think that depends on what your game is and what the poly count is. You know, certain AAA games at this point are doing things that are, hundreds of thousands of polygons, right? Um, and so I think that, you know, um, when I was working at Cloud Imperium, working on Star Citizen, I would work in, maybe something that had, an average character there could be 100,000 polygons up to 200,000 polygons. But that's a little bit different, I think, because, you're just, that's working within what how would I say, the strengths of the game engine, right? CryEngine or Lumberheart are really good at having a lot of count. Whereas if you're working on a game that's something like, you know, something like League of Legends or World of Warcraft, you're not going to have that ability, right? So it's just really going to depend on your game. I would recommend, probably somewhere just to be safe. Don't go over 50,000. I think that's a good starting point for everything. 50,000 triangles. So yeah, I think to me that's a good starting point. All right, this is kind of still doing its thing. Great. We're gonna try 100,000 polys. I think that's gonna be too low. We hit decimate current. See how you can see it's losing quite a bit of the detail there. That's okay. That's what we want, but we don't want it to be completely gone. 250. You're gonna see some of these details just get a little crisper there, and to me that's feeling pretty good. And we're gonna go ahead and just kind of get started on that. I got a question from Facebook, Brian Wynia. Hello, Brian. Hope you're doing good. What is my favorite robot or mech design in film and then in games? Good question. Um, my favorite mech design in film. Oh, there's so many, but I guess I'll give you a top three. Ed 209 from RoboCop is one of my favorite mech designs. I do really like Gypsy Danger from Pacific Rim, and then I think um, let's see. Something that I really liked was the District 9 mech. I thought that was a really cool one as well. Games wise, um, mechs, that's a good question. I mean, I like stuff like the Warhammer mechs are really interesting. Um, let's see what else there is out there. I don't know. I'm kind of blanking. I mean, I think I'm thinking like a lot of power armors. I think that are interesting. Like obviously like Master Chief and Doom, and I think those are great. But I'm kind of struggling to think of mechs. I'd be curious what you guys think about of mech designs in games, though. If there's any that really stick out to you that I'm missing. All right. So now that we've got these three OBJs or three Z tools that we're going to turn into OBJs, I'm just going to start exporting them. So I'm going to go to the top, export. You can do this as a mass thing if you'd like to. I'm selecting the head. I'm exporting it as an OBJ. I am exporting the body as another OBJ. And I'm going down and I'm exporting the shoulders. This is pretty straightforward. Cool. So now I will minimize this. And today we're inside Maya. That was fast. All we're going to do is we're going to go into try to find my things. I have my OBJs. I'm just going to drag them in here. I'm copying in this chess piece. And you'll see, ta-da, we have this inside of Maya now. Danny Rayner, hello from Toronto. Hello from Los Angeles. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to Art Jam. If you guys have any questions about what I'm working on so far, what my process is, let me know. Today we're going to try to start retopologizing. I don't really like the word retopologizing in this process because that's not actually what we're doing. When I think of retopology, I think of it as taking an object and like trying to one for one recreate it, and that's really not what we're doing here. We're more or less we are more or less making a second version of it that's better than the previous one, and we're going to continue to design on that. So now that I've got these in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my hypershade here. I'm hitting H. I've created a hotkey for that. I'm a really big hotkey fan. I'll use some marking menus, which are things that'll be in Maya, but they're definitely not my favorite things. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to select this all, create a blend, and I'm going to assign a blend to this material here. Notice that we'll talk about this a little bit, but I want to actually turn down not the transparency. Where is it? I feel like I'm missing an element here. There it is. The specular color on this, I'm going to turn this down a little bit, and I'm actually going to just give this a color. I like to give different assets in here when I start doing remodeling, a little bit of a color or something so that when I'm working on them, I know what mesh I'm working on. So this one we'll go with green. Gnomon's traditionally a lot of green, so let's use green. Maybe like kind of a forest olive, right? And I'll name this material. So I'm going to select this, and we'll say this is our imported OBJs. So the reason I'm naming that is so that when I select items, when I right click, I can hit assign existing material, and I can assign this imported OBJs if I want to do that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to select all of this stuff, and I'm going to go to my channel editor here, and I'm going to attach it to this layer. So they're all in here. I can hide them here now by right clicking, and then I'm just going to rename this layer and say original, or sometimes I just call these OG OBJs. Cool. Now I'm going to hide this. You can click here to turn this into a template or a reference layer. Reference layer means you can't touch it, which is kind of what I want here, right? And then I'm going to make another blend, and this one I'm going to call new model, something like that, right? I'm going to make a cube really quickly. I'm going to drag this cube out here. I'm not worried about scale right now, just so you know. I'm just going to start modeling this way. But what I'm going to start doing is I basically want to delete the three edges or three sides of this, 5 sides, I guess, of this cube. Now you can right click and do the marking menu to select in Maya if you want to select faces, vertices, edges, etc. I've changed that to hotkeys. So if you see me switching between vertex, face, edge, etc., that's because I'm using Control 1, Control 2, or Control 3. So I can switch between faces or vertices, edges, and then faces. I'm going to delete all of these really quickly. So I essentially just have a plane that's floating right here. I'm going to select it, and I'm going to add this new model to it. I'm going to, with my new model, I'm going to change the specular color to a slight blue. What that'll do is when we get a highlight on it, which I'm going to try to find, you can kind of see it here. I just saw it, wherever that light is, that default light is. We'll get a little bit of a highlight to it, and it'll be nice to kind of work on that. It just kind of makes it feel like more like metal. So much like I've been doing in previous streams when ZBrush, this is how I like to work in Maya, is I like to try to set it up so that I'm working on something that feels, it feels like what the final product should be. So if I'm modeling something that looks like metal, I'm going to try to replicate a very simple material in the viewport that looks like metal. Cool. So we've got our materials set up. We've got our basics right here set up. And I'm going to go to the front view, and I'm going to snap to the grid here. That way I'm only going to be working on one side of this model. Now, we can do a bunch of really cool things here. Under Edit Mesh or Mesh Tools, you can see we'll have a hide and show the modeling toolkit. Sometimes that gets a little strange, so I'm going to show the modeling toolkit here. And with the modeling toolkit, we can do a really interesting and cool feature called quad draw. Now, I'm going to show you guys quad draw, and then I'm also going to show you how I would model without quad draw. The reason that I would, in this instance, sometimes model without quad draw is that because this model, as I get close to it, I want you guys to think, we talked about this, I think, last stream or the previous streams, but a hard surface model is something that should have, in my opinion, very clear and defined planes. And that doesn't mean that the surfaces need to be planar or polygonal. It doesn't need to look like a Cybertruck, but what it does need to do is know where the beginning and ending of those planes are. Because this model is lumpy, as you can especially see, like if I zoom in here, see all the shading variance in here. That is not what this piece should look like. So I don't need to perfectly mimic the surface of what I have here. And so that's why sometimes quad draw isn't actually helpful. It might be helpful for me to quickly block it out, but for getting the final model, it's not great. Now, if you guys don't know what quad draw is, I'll show you quad draw. We click on this. This is going to be the live constraints here. Now, to make a live constraint, what I have to do is I got to go into my attribute editor, turn this off. So you can see I was clicking and it was making little things. Selecting this, I'm going to take the modeling toolkit. I'm actually just pull it over on the left so we don't have to deal with the issues that we were seeing. Quad draw. Okay. Oh, hang on. Getting some weirdness going on. I haven't used this is 2019, so I'm trying to make sure. Selection constraint. I feel like I used to go into this tool, which is, you see I'm getting this weird bug. I think I just make this live. That's fine. There's a little button up top here. See up here, there's more buttons. I've hidden them for you just so you don't have to see everything here. But there's a little magnet. So if I hit that and I make it live, and then I hit quad draw, I should be able to draw on the surface, and that's what all those little items draw. They used to be able to select your options here and like choose a mesh and choose the name. I think they ended up removing that just to use to tie it into the live feature, which is fine. But now I have the thing I don't like about that is now when you see I go into wireframe mode, regardless of what I'm modeling, everything is going to be stuck to this because quad live is on all the time, and it makes it so that I can't really have live and not live on at the same time, which frankly is annoying. So I'm going to drag this out to the front. You can see I'm actually fighting this issue. So what I'll often do is turn live off and on. Again, why I don't like this, the part of quad draw is much easier. Just hold down V and middle mouse button and click where I want this to go. So you can do it either way, but I'll show you guys both ways. Once I get my first planes here, what I'm saying by first planes is realistically, I'm gonna make sure that, oh, that looks like it's going far into the distance. Right. There's a really large plane on this character, which is this front kind of upside down triangle plane. You know, that's the first plane that I'm wanting to get. So I'm going to take that. I'm going to start there. Now, if I take this and I hit quad draw, what I can do now is I can continue off that model, and that might actually be easier, but see that it's not selecting anything. So I need to turn off my reference layer, select this object, hit live again, turn this back to a reference layer, select this, hit quad draw again. Now you see it's kind of highlighted that polygon, and we're going to start moving. Cool VFX. This is retopo, but I wouldn't really consider this retopo. I consider this remodeling. We've been jumping back and forth from ZBrush. So today we are working on a model that I have been working on. and I'm turning into a bit of a larger project that hopefully will continue on this stream for a while, so you guys can see the final completion of it, which would be this Jaeger, and eventually fighting some sort of a kaiju. But I want to eventually basically turn this from a fully fledged model where we can do textures, we can do UVs. Obviously, those are combined, render light, and just kind of show a little bit of everything and get into different types of software on the stream. So this is what we're jumping into. And today we're really just focusing on kind of the torso and the shoulders and getting them into Maya and starting to remodel them so that they are more precise. Do you ever wonder retopology is the worst part of modeling? I actually don't. I actually kind of enjoy retopology. I don't, again, my mindset of what I'm doing right now is not trying to duplicate what I already made or replicate what I made. For me, this is taking it into another program where I can make it even better than what I did before. So it's not, to me, this isn't like tedious work. This is um, just this is how I'm going to make it better, basically. So I'm going to take this plane, and one of the ways I like to work in Maya as well is very similar to how I work in ZBrush, and that is by I'm just going to start deleting some of these items as they happen, just by creating these planes. I kind of think of it like if you guys have ever seen somebody make paper craft or something out of paper, that's a lot of how I actually think about what this should look like. So adding a cut tool here, I'm going to just start creating. Um, I'm going to start adding polygons here that more or less just very simply will cover the shape. And so you'll see me rotating around quite a bit and placing these items so that I can get a very simple block out. Right. And now when I get to somewhere like this, where this gets kind of complicated for me, right? Um, this is like, there's clearly a lot of things in here. This, when I look at this to me says this is not worth my time trying to quad draw this because it's so low res, right? It's so not what I need it to be. But I can quickly get something like this. Like that's a big plane that I can block in. And at this stage, we're really just trying to get large planes. I'm not trying to get details. I'm actually specifically avoiding details. So maybe I'll put something here. Hold down Control if you want to add polygons, like in more rings. So I think having something here would be nice. Having something here would be nice. And then I'm, again, just trying to get really large planes. Seems like it doesn't want to add that polygon. There we go. And I will sometimes jump back and forth to ZBrush to make sure that I'm doing what I thought I was going to do. So I have this little carve out here. It looks like that was intentional that I have this little chisel here. So I'm going to specifically go around that to remind myself that that's a key feature that I want to keep in this. Again, we're making it better here. This isn't retopology in the way of like, I think most people, when they hear the words retopology, they cringe because they think that it's going to be awful and they're really going to dislike it. It's just tedious work. And for me, it's not really that. So yeah, we got a lot of questions coming in. Somebody saying, have I been polishing and cleaning in ZBrush then to Keyshot? Lee, we're not really going to go into Keyshot here today. So right now we're just trying to make a final model that's going to end up in ZBrush. Sorry, end up in Maya. So that's kind of where we're going. Let's see. Any other questions? You are not using, why am I not using ZBrush, or does it really make a lot more sense to follow those blocks on the model? ZBrush is not, I don't see ZBrush as being valuable for this instance to me, and that's kind of because this is something that ZBrush is going to give you a general flow, right? And what I really want to do is to have something that, how do I say, needs to be more precise. It needs to be more precise than other things. Let me see if I can pull open a previous model for you guys. That might be helpful to kind of give you a simple idea of what I'm really looking for. Let's see, let's see. Sorry, it's going to take a couple seconds while I dig around to give you guys an example. Do a search on my drive for something. Am I saying ZBrush is ZBrush Z? Sorry, are you saying ZMesh? I think you're saying is ZRemesh better for organic shapes? Yes, I think ZRemesh is much better for organic shapes. I don't really see it as it's. You will very likely never be able to use a Z-remeshed object as your final topology. I would really recommend, like, if you go look at some really nice topology on even on video games and on film stuff. The Last of Us 2 just had some things released of like what their facial topology is, and it's beautiful, and it's nothing you would ever get out of ZRemesh. ZRemesh is really good. It's a beautiful tool, and it's great for working fast and efficient, but it's not something that's really going to give you that final uh, quality in that way. It's just not. All right, let's see. I'm seeing a lot of ZBrush files, and I'm trying to find a not ZBrush file. I'm going to open a file. I don't know what this is, so we're going to see what it is as it opens. It's a night, so hopefully it's a cool night. Yeah, it's a helmet. We'll take a look at this helmet. So what I'm talking about difference-wise is something that's like this, right? This is a sculpt or started from a sculpt, right? But the quality of the actual surface, this is what the topology of this looks like, right? But when I smooth this type of quality that I can get where I can zoom in really tightly on a surface and get the idea that it even feels like this metal is being pushed underneath the metal. This is kind of what we want to get to. This is what a film quality model would look like, right? Not something that's a Z-remesh. You're never, ever going to get this at a Z-remesh. So Z-remesh, again, I'm not trying to bash on Z-remesh. It's a fantastic tool, but it's not going to do this for you. So this is what we're wanting to get to with, as it shows up, this tool. Got it? Cool. All right, so we're going to keep going. So again, we were getting into this. Now we're starting here. I'm going to answer some questions real quick, and please feel free to ask them. Lee is asking, is that the highest amount of detail you would go into ZBrush before taking it into Maya? I feel I stay in ZBrush trying to clean up too much. That's for me is definitely one thing that happens to me. Is I feel like I find myself noodling in ZBrush so far, but I'm also going to have to remodel the whole thing at a certain point when I'm doing hard surface characters. And that's kind of why I wanted to show you guys this process today, is because to me, um, getting to the end goal the end point is the goal, right? It's not having the coolest ZBrush sculpt. It's great to have a cool ZBrush sculpt. Don't get me wrong. Like, that's awesome. I love seeing those, but that's not the point of this, right? The point of this is to make a really nice model. This specific project, for me at least, maybe your goals are different, is to make a really nice model that is really well, like, and finally done. Something that could be animated and put in Pacific Rim, right? That's kind of the goal of this. So I want to take this, and what I'm doing is I'm basically just going to create really long strips. And I'm going to start choosing the apex of each corner. So you'll see me rotating around quite a bit, right? I'm kind of trying to find where the peak of that is, and we're just going to pick that. Now again, this model is a hard surface model, but it's also lumpy. Like, this model is not what we would want our final model to look like. So we will have to spend a considerable amount of time to, keep going. Oh, what's up? We have Izzy Madrano here from Facebook. Hello, sir. How are you? Good to see you. Hope you're doing well, man. Izzy is definitely an awesome artist. If you haven't seen any of his work, you should definitely search him and check him out. He's an incredible painter and illustrator, designer, generally cool person. All right, so I'm just going to again start doing these lines, trying to connect all this piece. There's kind of this invisible thing here that I'm trying to get. So, like, if we go over and I show you this piece, again, this is the piece that we're trying to retopologize. I intentionally created this secondary bevel here, right? And I don't want to lose that, but it's so lumpy that I'm not going to try to achieve it right now in um, with this quad draw. So I'm basically just going to draw some of these and start laying them out. This can get a little tedious, and I think this is where some of the tedium comes from. My recommendation is not to do what I just did. I actually wanted to do it the wrong way first so you can see. What I like to do is draw one, drag it all the way out to the end, figure out where that's going to go. Then I'll quickly add these 4 or 5 and put them where they should go. This is going to continue to snap to the surface. So now I know that I've kind of got that already. Again, this is lumpy. I'm going to have to adjust this. But what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to capture the surface of all the planes here. So this, for example, is a large plane that I'm going to try to capture at some point, this area here. So I'm going to make a little tiny square, and then I'm going to drag it all the way out here. And maybe if I want to add a plane or two in here, I will. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time trying to get that to sit perfectly. I'm going to have to work with that after it's done. And in fact, I might just do it like this, drag it all the way out here, and maybe we'll snap 1 or 2 in there and go from there. Cool. So we got that plane. We know we're going to have a big plane here. That one's going to be a good enough indicator for me. I'm going to start making this plane. That's that one. So again, I'm trying to go very quick. Quad draw is great for this, but I want to kind of break that myth that I hear a lot of people say that, you need to, that, I guess that, like, retopology is this really boring part of the process. And if you like modeling, retopology, I think, is different for you than it is for me, because, or if you don't like modeling, because for me, it's a part of the process where I'm just trying to more or less finalize what the actual object is. This is where my final model will come from. And so what I can do is I can hide this, and you'll see this is where we're starting to get to. So this is good progress for me. I'm starting to get to a point where I would be very disappointed if I lost my work. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And so I'm going to go ahead and just save this real quick. So apologies for the little delay. and we'll get to a decent point. We've only been about 40 minutes today, so you know, we'll get there. We'll get something. So the goal is to get this everywhere. And what you can do, there's a couple ways you can mirror this. I found one easy way that does kind of create an issue sometimes with um, modeling with your outliner. If I go ahead and I group this whole object here, and then I'm going to select that group. Then I'm going to go Edit, Duplicate Special. I'm going to hit this little box here. I'm going to make this an instance. So it's not a copy, it's an instance based off of, we'll just say the world, and we'll scale it in X at -1. And I'm going to hit apply. What that did is it duplicated it across, but what it lets me do is also lets me move the whole object in a mirror. And if I start adding to it, you'll see that I can more or less create a symmetry. There's other ways to do this. This is the way that I like to do it. I'm going to go back and show everything. Create a hotkey button for that. I'm also going to create a hotkey button for edit, delete all by type history. So I can delete that as well. Now I can come back in here, quad draw. You'll see it kind of gives me the good side and the bad side. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start making these abs and all these other pieces. Now, again, I am not going to connect all these pieces in quad draw. That is not what I need to do, right? I just got a question about why don't I use mirror mesh? I'll just kind of, let me turn off live real quick so I can show. So there is mirror mesh options, right? Mirror mesh does that, cut geometry. You kind of do this, right? The mirror mesh, what I turns it into, it kind of gives it that previous style, right? What I don't like is now if I move this vertex, it doesn't really do that. It doesn't create an instance, right? So I can do things, but it doesn't allow me to create it just like I had before. So it does a different type of a function, which is kind of why I use this group duplicate special option. So yeah. We got some questions. Cool VFX from YouTube is asking, don't tell us you start with Topogun, where it's software, it's almost dead. No, I don't use Topogun. This is Maya. Let's see. Let's see. What else do we got? Retopo with Topogun is easier. That's fair, but I'm not trying to do exactly topology like you're kind of talking about. Let's see. Hello, hello. Hope you guys are all doing well. Yeah, like for me, I'm going to duplicate this later. Like again, I'm not. If you guys expect me to have a final mesh and being able to mirror this perfectly by the end of the stream, it's not happening, right? What we're really getting at today is we're doing a block out of what this is going to look like. So I'm more or less just starting to get this going. And what I'm going to do, like on this, for example, oh, I don't have live. Hang on. I had to turn live off. Select this, live, reference layer. Select, quad draw. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just draw this out. I'm going to add a quick one, and I'm going to delete this one. And then I'm going to make another one here. And I'm going to drag this all the way down here. And I'm going to block those out. And I want those to all be on one plane at some point, which is why for right now, I actually might undo that and make this very simple and just say, okay, this is just going to be the bottoms of these planes. This is the way that we're going to make it so that at the end, it's all going to be, we might need one more in here. One nice, consistent, smooth gradation so that when you see this on the side, that those should all be one. Whereas you'll see like in my sketch here, the goal of the design is that they're all one consistent arc. But because it's sculpted in ZBrush and it's a sketch, it doesn't look like that right now. So I'm not going to try to duplicate what I have here because this is not good enough. This is not accurate. So I'm going to spend more time on it in here. But it does give me a nice little time to try doing some other elements. Right, so maybe I want to get this shelf. I like the thickness of this is something I can do. Cool. And then maybe to like here. I have a nice plane here that I want to try to keep at some point. But you got to drag these a little closer so that it actually sees it as a potential quad. Otherwise, it won't. Spend a lot of time fighting it. And you'll see there's all this kind of stuff that's going on here. So I'm trying to capture the essence of what we want before I spend a ton of time making those shapes. At this point, this is kind of the same situation as I had up here. This is a nightmare. There's no way I'm going to try to do this right now. Okay. All right, so we're going to jump in here. This is a plane that I want to try to keep. And we're just going to start getting these big pieces. And I'm probably going to stop this once I get this front area done. And then maybe this little front piece here, like maybe we could just get this done real quick. And then we'll get into the actual modeling side of this. Because right now we're really just, think of this like, primary forms. This is where you're going to get your primary forms. This is where some weirdness going on. This is what you're going to build off of. It's not your final geometry. So even in here, you see, often I find that Quadra fights me on stuff like this. Probably going to be as much as I need it to go. There's some form issues in there that I'm going to have to sort out, so I'm not going to dive into that too heavily. Again, this is just kind of to block stuff out. You'll notice that I'm rotating around a lot. And that is, again, to kind of make sure that we're getting the essence of what the piece is. So maybe we need to merge those. You can middle mouse drag merge. Sometimes I'll just quickly multi-cut and just add a vertice to just quickly quad draw, even though it's not going to make something like that. This session will be recorded to watch later. Yep, for sure. It will be on our Twitch VODs for a little while, and then we have been thinking about creating a Art Jam playlist on YouTube, so you could check them all out there as well. All right, so we got all this done. I'm going to do a little bit of the side here, just because it's an quick, easy win. Some of these planes in there. Bridging over all of these details. Am I going to bake the detail, or do I want the model? I want the model in this one to hold the details. We're not going to do much normal mapping, displacement mapping. This is going to be straight up high res model. That's the goal for this one. You might, some of these things, depending on how the project goes, I've thought about bringing it into Unreal because that's something that personally I don't have a lot of experience in, but I'd like to learn. So maybe bringing it into Unreal. That would obviously need to have more normal maps, but I still would want it to be kind of like a hero piece that you could actually crawl around on if Shadow of Colossus style, right? Pacific Rim, where it's this massive object. It's kind of the goal. I'm just going to go to this plane here because it's a pretty clearly defined plane. And I'm really just and then we create that. So that's a little warped for me. I'm not in love with that. And since we're already here, I'll just go here. This is where you start, and it's really hard to find a place to end until you're like completed with it. The back piece here would be a little more complicated, right? There's some more complicated shapes in here that I would need to figure out. This is Maya, Tristan, or sorry, Esteban. This is Maya and Tristan. We are working on taking this piece that I kind of showed last week, this Jaeger, and bringing it into Maya so we can start making a more final version of the model. So we're going to slowly work on this process and end up attempting to have a really high res model that could be used for, a film, a game cinematic, something like that. Not necessarily intending for it to be, something that's game, right? I'm not 100% looking for that, but it is something that, we're looking for, that'd be high res, right? I'd shown you guys before, like, let's pretend that I just turned everything on. Let's pretend that this is the size of a character here, right? So this is the size of your character. Get out of the way. And this is the size of your thing, right? I would want to make it so that it feels like you could walk around it, which means the model itself would need to have quite a bit of detail in it. So that's kind of where we're at. All right, so now we're in here. I think at this point I've got a lot of really good starting points. I can keep noodling around at this point to get a little bit more mesh to start from. But to be frank, this is a really good starting point for me. And what I have here isn't bad as a starting point at all. So I'm going to turn off live. If I hit three on Maya, 1, 2, 3, we'll show you the smoothing. I'm just going to save this really quickly. But this is kind of where we're at, right? And this obviously isn't the end goal. The end goal isn't to have this area, this thing, right? I will be subdividing after retopology, yes. So now what my job is to start modeling this stuff and bringing it together. So I'm actually going to start breaking this into several pieces at some point. But first, what I want to do is start opening this, having this model up again. It's just live. It's not live anymore. We're just kind of modeling at this point. I'm going to kind of, select this other side because I don't need it, and I'm going to delete it. It's just nice to have it as a visual. And I might just put this as a template for a little bit. No, I'm going to delete some history. And you can see there's some weirdness in some of these forms. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to actually start modeling. And this is where I'm going to start breaking some of those forms, some of the previous forms at least, especially in here. Right, so I want to take this, and I want to start looking down looking down the angle. And what I mean by looking down the angle, I'm going to switch just so you guys can see me. But imagine that you have an object. It can be any object. I have a phone here. I have a notebook. So let's take a look at this notebook. Okay, if this is the plane, this is the front of the chess piece that we're going to be working on. I actually want to look down it in this direction, and you can kind of see, like right here. You can probably see me looking down this right here. Well, there we go. Right, you can kind of see that. I want to see this line be as straight as possible. And while doing so, I also want to see this plane be as flat as possible, right? So what I'm doing on this piece is this area here is what I'm looking at. And I want to make sure that all of these vertices are making sense with this. Now, when I'm looking down this, what I'm seeing immediately is this edge is higher than that edge. There's this weird zigzag pattern that's kind of happening, right? So what I need to do, or what I'm going to do, is I'm either going to bump over to ZBrush to kind of understand what my intention was with this, right? So what was I actually trying to do here? Why is that zigzag there? I can also open up the model that I have and say, okay, what was my goal here? What's happening? Okay, so I have a plane that needs to go from here to here. This whole face needs to be flat. Right now, it is not flat, as you can see. So I need to fix that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull this one out here and try to get this to be in line with this. And this is where you need to actually spend, this is again why I'm not going to spend hours and hours and hours doing retopology in a program that like TopoGun for me, that isn't going to do what I need. I'm going to delete that face, and I'm going to try to make it so that it looks as flat as possible. So I'm kind of looking down just like I showed you with my book. I'm being pretty picky here. And at this point I might add, we'll just do the multi-cut instead of that, but I might add some topology. I only like to add topology where I need to add topology. And for now, I'm not concerned. I'm seeing questions about, I'm not concerned about triangles. I'm not necessarily even concerned about edge flow. That is not the concern right now. The concern right now is planes. I think a lot of the questions that I'm getting, or the questions we get from people who are wanting to get into be modelers and things like that, is they get, you hear a lot of things about like, should I use tries? What's the best way to do this? What's the best way to do this? And that's all good when you get to more of a final product, right? But the beginning point of that, getting a good piece of art. So you need to get rid of some of that mindset of, what's the best, why are you, like questions of like, why are you doing X? Like, why are you, not getting to the final product right now? That's because it doesn't really matter right now. That final product to me doesn't matter because I'm not even close to there yet. So I need to make the art part of it as good as I possibly can before I move forward and I start thinking about any of that technical side. So yeah, I've come out of live mode very early. I think a lot of people don't do this, maybe, but this is the way that I like to work for sure. So as you saw, I even just extended this plane here, and I'll show you. I'll quickly add a couple elements here, right? And that'll create a really nice plane for me. I can tell you that plane, and another little tip and trick, get my hypershade to come back up. Probably away so I have a little more screen space. In my model, at the very beginning of the stream, I had made two materials. I had made some materials that was a dark green one, and I made the shiny one for new model. Now notice that I made it a shiny one. And the reason I made it a shiny one is that so when I start modeling, because this is going to be a shiny metallic surface, I'm going to spin the model around like this often. And I want to see where these highlights are. That's kind of the point, right? Eventually I want to know what that's going to look like. Does it look like it's pinched? Am I seeing, a bunch of pinching issues? Is it wobbly? Like, look at this surface here. This is super wobbly, right? Especially if I go like this, you're going to see all this kind of stuff, whereas this is one singular plane. It's really important for me when I use this retopology style to have something with a specular highlight on it, because let's say I take it and I add this Lambert material, that's gone, right? That specular reflection is gone, and it makes it incredibly hard to evaluate the surface. Yes, there is shading, there are highlights and shadows, but there's no specular here. And what that means is the difference between this And this is completely different for how I'm able to evaluate it. So, Marcella Adams is asking, how long would the modeling phase be scheduled at a company for an asset of this size? I don't know. That's a really good question. It's a really good question because I've never worked on a project like Pacific Rim or something like that. So I imagine it would be a very long time. I'm going to Control Delete. I'm going to just add a button for this so I can delete some of these edges. So hopefully don't have those there. Cool. So now I know, this is just the simple starting point, right? But we know that at this point, this plane that I created, again, we're going to start very simple. So this plane right here, this singular plane that should be flat, is solid, right? For questions for people who are coming in, this is what we're going to be making over the course of this stream and probably several other future streams. Right now we are taking it from ZBrush, which is this program here, and we are jumping into Maya to retopologize. So this plane here is the one that I've started on, and now I'm basically going to start from one that I know looks good, and I'm going to spread my way across the whole surface, starting to make those planes read and look good. Now I have some weirdness in here, right? I know that I was intentionally trying to create sort of this little form where this plane might be slightly off this plane, because I'm creating a little shelf here. So that means this is part of why I stayed away from this. There it is. This plane and this plane do not need to be aligned. So what I can do is show everything again. I think where this is at is probably okay. There's a little bit of a weirdness here, right? How it kind of cuts in and out. So again, you're going to see me rotate a lot. What I want to do is I'm actually just going to extrude this. And we'll do like a target weld from here to here. Oh, I had multiple vertices selected. Target weld from here to here. And we'll say, let's even do a target weld here to here. No, not there. Just kind of snapped it here because I know I want it to eventually meet this plane or can get close to meeting this plane. And I think it'll be more interesting if it doesn't, and it'll also be easier to handle. So now I'm going to do the same kind of thing. This plane is one that we've worked on. You guys are going to hear me say the word plane over and over and over, right? So apologies in advance. See, there's this little bump here, and this is where we're getting a problem in our mesh. It's going in and up, and that's because here it's out, and then we went in, and then we went up. So we need to figure out what our goal is here, and I think it might be to eventually break this into two pieces. We have a little shelf here that we want to be making. So let's do that now. We're going to delete that. I'm going to put it on the same plane as this. I'm just going to snap holding C and middle mouse to here. Then I'm just going to move it along its own curve here. No, that's fine actually where it is. Just so we don't have that weird artifact, I'll just make a little angle from here to here. For me. There we go, so we can kind of see it a little better. And what that's going to do is it's going to create this tiny little shelf. Now I'm going to take this, I'm going to probably push this out a little bit so that's flatter. Again, kind of like you saw me do with the book earlier, just looking down the spine of the book, looking down the edges of everything here. Then I'm going to start bridging these gaps. And then we'll start getting into some more pieces here. So this is the way I work, and this is a very slow, but it's a methodical. And I think the thing that is effective about it is that Um, when you start to go when you start working like this, um, you're more or less, I hear a lot of people talk about speed of stuff or whatever, but I know that where I'm starting is good, and I don't have to come back to it that often, right? We're gonna show it all again. Now we've kind of got this more or less. We have like this area here at like a phase one complete, quote unquote, right? Meaning that if I quickly came in and added some edge flow here, this is going to not look amazing because of some of the topology that's here. We're going to see a couple pinches. But when I do this, you'll see, I'll just do a quick one. Those planes are pretty sharp and that those planes are pretty crisp. Obviously, we need one here. Right, but we're getting some pretty sharp and crisp planes that look nice. And adding those holding edges in the future, or the supporting edges, or whatever other term that you prefer, will be easy to do, and it will very quickly, the model will actually resolve itself very, very, very quickly. So going to continue moving forward. We're going to start on this element here. I'm just going to grab the edge. We're not using slide. We're not using any of that fancy stuff right now. Moving it on the top of everything. I'm just going to take this. See, like I can see that this surface to me is a little strange. So I'm just going to pull it up at this point. I'm going to extrude it down, and then we'll go in here. Here, put this here. Okay. Let's go ahead and just, let's see. How would I do that? This one needs to go up. Extrude both of those down. So again, I think the idea of that this is retopology, this is not retopology, this is modeling. I'm just using something as a base to work on top of. And that might sound confusing, but it's the truth because I'm not actually using my model from below as something that I'm trying to copy one for one. I'm going to hold down W and left click, axis, custom, set to edge. I can click an edge and now I can move along that edge. And so that'll help me create something that's little bit more aligned. Like some reason, oh, there it is. And what you'll notice is I'm getting a lot of stuff. I'm just really trying to clean it up, right? And I'm trying to align edges. I'm trying to, I'm seeing a comment in the chat from YouTube. Patience, yes. Do you want to be a hard surface modeler? You need to be very patient because to make a crisp, clean model, it's going to take you a long time. And if you want it to be something that's really, really, quality at the end of the day, it's going to take you a long time to do it. So the questions of speed and stuff like that, to me, the speed actually comes from the patience, because if I just come in here and just start tossing vertices in here, start trying to retopologize my thing from the very beginning, it's going to go slower because I'm actually going to hurt the process. I'm going to do more harm by attempting to work faster. Again, right now, got a couple questions, or I'm getting a couple questions about edge flow, about retopology. Not important right now, right? I'm using basic modeling flows of the form, right? But right now, that's not really the main goal. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this section here. We'll try to straighten all this out, and I'll show you what my goals is for this. Now, right now, kind of like we did in here, we straightened all these out and tried to get these planes to be aligned, right? That's kind of in the model from before. I'm actually just make a new layer for this. So I can go off and we'll say this is the new model. Quickly hide that. Now this generally has a good flow, but because it's a ZBrush sculpt, because it's a decimated thing, we zoom in, kind of that same mindset. Look at this, looks like like the surface of the moon, right? We're not. That's what I do not want the surface of my robot to look like it's got craters all over it, right? It's all got all these little imperfections in it. So we're going to clean this up. So take this, and I'm going to do this one at a time. Sometimes it's easier to just do it one at a time, right? So I'm going to select this edge. I have slide edge, which is it's set to, for me, Alt E. I believe it's under Edit Mesh. They change mesh and mesh tools and some of these around. So slide, I don't know where slide is. It's hidden. There we go, under mesh tools slide. What that does is it kind of moves it in and out based on where it is. So I'm going to select the edge, show the model, and I'm going to use slide edge. Now the problem that we had before with this, right, was with quad draw, the actual peak is here, right? This is the peak of where I would want to put this vertice, but doing that, I'm going to be on this really, serrated edge. But with slide edge, pretty quickly come in. Looks like it's got some snap settings I might want to remove, but now I can more or less put it on that edge. And that's part of why when we look at this is so bumpy, because the actual surface that we were trying to put it on wasn't able to be snapped to. Now that is kind of annoying me with these snaps. So I'm going to go into Mesh Tools, Slide Edge, and I'm going to turn off Use Snapping so that now when I do this, it's a little more controllable. And I'm going to go into each one of these. I'm using Slide Edge again to align that. That set edge, this is just for a single vertice maybe. Now we're getting pretty good. So now you can see that these lines, these actual arcs, are much more precise than they were before. Right? And these also lined up with these, so I need to do the exact same thing on this page here. Page. Now it's got a little bit more wobble in it, right? And so that's something we might need to adjust. But it also could be a good time to just kind of select all these. I think you can hit bridge over here, and that'll bridge those, right? That's going to be a nice little surface for us. But again, from this surface, we have some weirdness, right? So this goes in, out, out. So we need to take these. I'm going to select W. I'm going to go to component, select this one, and just kind of push things in and out from the top view. Now again, this is not what the model itself looked like, right? The ZBrush model, if we turn it on, I'm probably going too far outside of the model. It doesn't necessarily 100 fit exactly as it should. That's okay, because we don't want to make it look like the ZBrush model, because the ZBrush model is lumpy. Don't do that. If you do these functions like that, you can also hit G to replay your last action. So you can make that a little easier on yourself. Okay, so now we've got this one. And you can see even when it's in low poly, this is starting to work pretty well, right? This is starting to get pretty clean. So I'm going to take the same thing. I'm going to select all these edges. Edge, 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 edge. We'll do these two. And we'll bridge them. And I'm going to take this edge. I'm going to slide it that way. Using that slide feature again. Using the component feature, which is kind of more or less like moving along normals. Like there's some, there we go, snapping setting going on. I'm going from multiple angles. You consistently see me rotating all the way around, rotating around multiple times, and trying to get the most cleanest possible result I can. I want this distance to be a consistent distance. It shouldn't be, constantly going in and out. We have a shelf here that we need to create, right? So that's something I haven't done here. So we'll go ahead and do that. Take all these verts, we'll grab them. We'll say, okay, you actually need to be here. You being there means you probably need to be somewhere in here. This is going to create a little bit of a strange set of forms, so we're going to have to figure that out. I don't like how this arc comes in and then juts out and then continues going in, so I'll probably just take this and put it here. And then looking again at this, there's more shelf here. So grabbing this again and saying, okay, maybe this piece should come out a little bit further. At this point, like I said, it's more or less that previous thing is a guide. It's a reference piece. Birasama 10 from Twitch is asking, isn't there any other way around? Like, can we clean up using ZRemesh and then use that as a base for retopo? You can. I don't think you'll get as good of a result, but it's a way to do it. I think to be honest, you're not going to get as clean of a result from a modeling standpoint. There we go. That is more or less done at this point. Right, so as you see, I'm starting to smooth this. It's actually starting to come together already, which is great. Here, we're going to go ahead and just kind of model a little bit more of this piece. Extrude it down. Drag that out. Extrude this down. See, there's this kind of shelf that needs to be created. And those are really important when you start making stuff like this, because that's going to be where a lot of your highlights are. You can see that line now looks pretty good from multiple angles, which is exactly what I wanted. We're going to cut off this piece here just because I don't really need it right now. and it's just, again, for expediency's sake. You can see there's some little issues here. So again, if you're interested in doing this modeling style, if you want to get into like really intense, precise hard surface modeling, this is what you should be looking for. These series of vertices are not aligned and they don't go along a consistent curve. So I need to pull this out very slightly so that there is one. Rotating around constantly. Smoothing often so that I can look at it like this, and I often will do this little circle move to see what the highlights look like. I can tell you that's already starting to look pretty good. Save that. You can also select it, go to mesh display, normals, and I want to do average, no, hard and soften edges, and do 30. And that'll kind of give you a quick preview before it's smooth as well, like what it's going to look like. That basically says it's going to have soft edges if it's under 30-degree change. It gives you a better idea of what that'll look like. Now, I don't need to do all these little pieces here. This is another piece of railing inside, but I do want to create a little small, like right here. This needs to go out quite a ways, right? Set the tone for that with this. It's okay. Hide this, grab this edge all the way over here, and we're going to extrude it, and I'm just going to go down. That will give us, kind of a nice shelf in there. Are there any underrated tools, Elephant 12 asks, that I use frequently? Slide Edge is a tool that I use all the time. The custom access is one that I use all the time. Those are probably some of the big two that I would use a lot that I don't know if they're not used a lot, but they're definitely tools that I would highly, highly recommend people use. All right, we're going to do this little bit here. Going to make it follow along very quickly. I'd say for me, this feels a little strange that there's this little area here. So I'm actually just going to push this down. If you guys have any questions about anything, please feel free to ask. If you've never been to an art jam or never seen an art jam before, what we're doing today is we're just kind of working on a project. Before, we've been doing a lot of ZBrush sculpting and kind of hanging out and just concepting and sculpting things. Today, we're doing a little bit more hard surface modeling and remodeling and topology stuff. So if you have questions about that, please feel free to ask. We are using Maya today. And then, of course, we have Gnomon staff, recruiters, and admissions and events in our channel. Help here and happy to help answer questions. So if you have questions about Gnomon or our offerings or our classes, feel free to ask and we can get you in touch with somebody. The Jaeger sculpt was last week. I didn't actually do the Jaeger sculpt on stream. This was a sculpt that I did off stream. This is what it looks like. B. Russman, if you're doing it for concept work, then ZRemesh is fantastic. Dynamesh, ZRemesh, those are fantastic. In my opinion, that's more what those are used for, and kind of doing little small incremental steps to get to a final product. That's what they're really good for. Yeah, then of course use ZRemesh, but the goal of this is to do something that's more of a final quality model. Take this. I'm going to slide some of these edges out. Let's see. So I have this weird kind of form here, and this is the areas that I had kind of avoided before, right? Now I can't really avoid them. It's not for too much longer. Do I think Blender is good? Blender is good. Yeah, I think it's definitely a program that's coming into its own, I think, in the past year or so. I'm interested to see what happens with the future of it. There's a lot of people, talking about it now, and I'd be interested to see if using it a lot. But as far as animation studios, film studios, game studios, I personally haven't heard too much as whether or not Blender is being used. But I think as far as a free program, as far as for beginners or people who are interested in 3D, yeah, Blender's a fantastic program. I'm gonna pull this whole loop out. It's worldwise this way. It's going to let me push this whole loop in. So those two can kind of overlap. So at first, everything's going to start to kind of feel like it's a bunch of different pieces of paper, right? Pieces of paper kind of separated and stacked on top of each other. And the first goal of this is to align them so that they're flat and they don't have lumps in them, right? Then the next goal is to start making it so it feels like they sit on top of each other. And that's what we're starting to do here. And that's what we're starting to do here. So move all that by here. Right? So you can start to see some of these things come together, which is cool. Now this one can maybe go up a little bit. It can be a little thinner of a piece, and it can be go in a little bit maybe, so it's more pointy. Target weld these two pieces together. You can see we're starting to get this thing to come together here. Okay. So now we're getting to this area. And this is just kind of the process. And I think, hopefully what's visible here is it's slow, right? This is a tedious process, sure, but this is a modeling process. It's not about this process right now is not about trying to do details. It's really a fundamental, how do you make something that can slowly get to what the final product is. Like it may seem like it's taking a really long time, but at the same point, like we're gonna have a final model here. If we just did this on stream live, I could block out likely the whole character in a day or 2 days work, uh, at least this level, right? It's been an hour and a half, and so to take a character and get to a point where I can get to this point on the entire character, it could take 2 or 3 days. I've never worked in Houdini at all, actually. Does sound interesting, though. GA Crew 312 from Twitch is asking, why am I not doing the retopo for the whole model? That's kind of just for example of the stream. It is something I would and will do at some point. But right now, this is a kind of an example of what the process is and how I work on it and what I will be doing for the future. You will often see me bounce around. I think at this point we've kind of gotten this whole area is pretty good. If I do the trick of this, what was it, this, you can start to see the character actually coming together. Now I'll start working on the pieces underneath it. So there's obviously a lot to do here. There's a lot of details to add here. What I'd like to do for the rest of the stream is I actually want to probably focus on this little panel, these panels here, and ideally we can even get into some details. Again, the goal of the stream today is to show some of the process. It's not necessarily to get into all the details and do that right now, but I would like to show a little bit of that so that you guys can see how it's done, or at least how I would do it. One thing to kind of mention or note, I guess, is there's so many different ways to model. There's so many different ways to make things that this is the way that I do them, right? Somebody else may hate using live, may hate getting out of ZBrush so early, right? And that can be another professional. There's all kinds of ways for people to work and different processes. So, take what I'm saying, my tips and tricks as my process, and if it works for you, it works for you. If you find a process that works better for you, then you do that. Because making art at the end of the day is about you and how you feel about it, and is it something that's enjoyable for you? If you look at what I'm doing and you're like, this is awful, like I don't think I could spend that much time doing that, then try doing it a different way. That's okay. There's some weirdness going on in there, but we'll fix that over time. I want to get to this piece here. So this area in here has some very strange forms that I never really fully resolved, as you can see. So now I have to figure out what they are. So this is actually some of the pain that I can speak to as far as like, people, I get a lot of questions about, 3D concept sculpting and designing in 3D for games or movies or whatever. And how cool it is that you can hand it off to a modeler. But if your sculpt that you hand off to a modeler looks like this, like you can show this to a director, right? And it looks like this maybe, and they're like, yeah, that looks amazing. That looks great. Let's get it in game. Let's get it in the film. And then you hand it off to the modeler. What I'm doing right now is what they have to do, right? This is what a modeler actually would be doing is more or less recreating the piece from scratch and trying to figure out all of these tiny little details that were not resolved at all. They appear to be resolved. They are not fully resolved. So props to the modelers who have gotten concept models from people, probably myself included, and had done significant amounts of work to make them look good. Okay. I'm trying to figure out, you can tell I'm moving some things around, trying to get it to work in multiple angles, but it's not. And that's okay. Take this form and we pull it out here. Swap this. Again, trying to understand these forms, trying to see how they work, what makes sense with them. Function and form and planes and readability and rhythm and all these base level concepts is really what this process right now is about. Does this work? Does it seem to make some sense at like a base block level? And if it does, that's great. But if it doesn't, then you have problems. Yeah, the big history list is scaring people. There you go. Get rid of that. B. Russman from Twitch is asking if he's, or they're wondering, is it better to do small projects or a big project that's better for your portfolio? I feel like I'm good enough now to work on a big project for my portfolio. I guess the question I would ask you is, what do you mean by big project? If you know, I think you need to have a couple pieces in your portfolio at least, right? You know, at least if you're trying to get a job, you're gonna have at least 3 or 4 minimum. Um, so, what kind of projects are you thinking about? Um, you know, what's kind of your goal for your portfolio? Are you trying to highlight certain things or not? I think if you're going to pull off a big project, the thing you need to be careful of, or going to attempt a big project, the thing I would be careful of is um, not taking on something too large. You know, doing a big project is fun and it can be really, really challenging and exciting. But, you know, if you're working on your portfolio, just be careful that you don't bite off more than you can chew. All right, so there's a lot of little elements in here that I'm kind of still noodling on. So I'm using this thing back there, wants to be welded. Let's just extrude this down. We're pulling out these shapes here. And then on these sides, let's slide them out a little bit. Somebody had a question about the slide process. I don't seem to have any issues with slide. I don't know what the performance issues would be there. Some weird forms here, which I don't fully understand, so I'll have to fix that at some point or understand what those are. Maybe take this one little piece here and bring it in. Starting to get there. What I might do is, cut this. Think about edge flow a little bit here. A supporting edge for this to come in, and I think I'd like Control Delete. Is that what I had? Hotkey? Yeah. So that's starting to come together. Which is nice. Again, it's smooth. This is very intentionally over smooth, but we can start to see this coming together, which is good. I bring this edge. There's some weirdness here, what these forms are doing. So I need to resolve that. You can see it's kind of a slow but methodical approach, and once you start getting to a certain point, the end model isn't really that far away. It's a lot of details, but it's not like you can see it pretty quickly, I guess, is what I'm getting at. Okay, so there's some overlaps of forms that I would want to fix there, but I think generally this is all kind of starting to come together. Is my monitor 21:9? Yes, it is. I have a 30-inch monitor, which is like the 1600 by 14 something something. Yeah, so it's a little hard to do that. Got some questions about portfolios. What do I prefer to see in portfolios? Um, and then got questions about what's the ideal Gnomon application portfolio. That's two questions. For the Gnomon application portfolio, I would actually recommend you go to our Twitch channel and take a look there, because we recently did a meeting with our admissions advisor where she kind of talks about tips and tricks for portfolios and what we look for in portfolios. And I have a feeling Hannah in that video will be able to answer your questions far better than I will be able to or right now. For portfolios, for applications, I think I've talked about this before, but one thing I just kind of tell everybody is don't make the person you're wanting to apply to or whatever, don't make them ask questions when they review your portfolio. So don't make them wonder anything about your portfolio. Make it very clear to them that what you're trying to do, and that means what position you're going for, what your skill level is, all kinds of things in there. Just don't make them ask questions, and show your best work first, because typically people looking through portfolios are limited on their time. Yeah, and all of our admissions team offers free counseling for our portfolios and free coaching. So if you're looking to get into Gnomon, or you want to explore what it would be like to get into a Gnomon program, honestly, talking to admissions is by far the best way to explore that. All right. We're going to continue working on that. We're going to continue. I think you can start to see how this is working, right? You can see this if I pull it forward, just the hair. How it is mirroring the shapes, right? Just good. That's exactly what we want, but it also is cleaner, and it's not losing the essence of what the piece is, and that's a really important element here. All right, so we've about an hour 15 left, and so what I want to do is just get a little bit more block out of this, right? What I have here, I want to get that here, which is pretty close. So I'm going to just do this very quickly. Talking and working at the same time is a little tough. So if you guys have questions, please ask, and I'm happy to answer. But for the next couple seconds at least, I'm just going to try to do this very quickly. All right, so I just wanted to spend a couple seconds kind of spending some time getting this set up. I also split off those pieces so we don't have to focus on them right now. And I'll kind of spend more or less the rest of the stream showing you guys how I would get into some of these details. I do think this is a little early, just full disclosure, to get into some of the details. But at this point, there are some things we can do, right? So things like this kind of a shape here where we have a line that goes up. First, what I need to do before I get into any details is I need to harden all of the edges so that the edges and the actual shape of each piece is going to be good to go, right? So what that means is you'll notice that each of these are actually separate meshes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the whole mesh. I'm going to go to mesh. So many little things up here. There it is, mesh. And I'm going to separate. These are all separate now, which is good, so I can work on them individually. I'm going to start here. And I'm going to just kind of start modeling. I know that this is a little piece that I need to adjust and kind of start tweaking. And then I can start adding edge loops. And I'm just holding Control W or Alt W for me, which is the hotkey for me for insert edge loop. I'm just going to run this down all of the surfaces that I know are going to need it. Might just, instead of having a single point here, I might actually break this into two. So selecting this, you can hit bevel, and then using the middle mouse click, you can kind of adjust that. Now that's obviously going to create a little bit of a weirdness there, um, but I can fix that by kind of using some of these edge tools. So it's a little cleaner. Maya's bevel tool is not amazing. I often spend a little bit of time trying to clean up what it does there. And then I also need to fix this. So I can either add edges by saying like, okay, we'll do a multi-cut, put one here, right? And maybe we'll put one here. Starting point, so we can create that shape. Eventually this would go underneath that, meaning the, we're just going to do that now, I guess. No, we'll make that last, but we'll do that an element there to make it look like it goes underneath. Right now, I'm not really concerned about this edge, but if you are kind of OCD and don't like having quads or not having quads, we can get rid of that and figure these things out in a minute. We still have some other remaining shapes here, so let's see. This can probably go here, right? This can probably go here. So it means we can delete this. This can, sometimes like just drawing the cut tool more in the direction that it should go. And we'll put one here. I think that's generally going to work for me. I can also add in another loop here for this plane there. We do have a bigger plane that we were trying to get here, so I want to make sure that I don't forget some of the intention of what this was. So I actually had forgotten about that, and that's where this is actually going to create a little bit of a problem where I did do this. I got into the weeds a little bit of like, topology, and it means that this needs to be adjusted again. So that might have been a mistake, and I might need to run something like this so that there's a plane change there. So this top plane and this plane were intentionally built like that. You can kind of see here. Pushing that even further down to emphasize the difference between those two planes. Cool. Questions we got. When you do concept characters, what goes into your thought process, like from start to end? That's a really large question. You know, I think there's a from reference to goals to there's so many different things that kind of uh, go go into that. But initially, you know, I think the number one thing to start with is just knowing what you want to make. I think is important. The goal of what you're making. I'm not going to focus on this piece, so we're going to have some issues here that I'm just not going to address in the stream today, just because I need to figure out what all this faceted sculpting would be. But so far, I think you can start to see, at least on this piece, how it's starting to start to resemble what we wanted, but it's actually a hard surface piece and a nicely, maybe not nicely, but it's getting to be a nicely topologized piece. I'm intentionally removing edges from places that I don't want them to be creating planes. Sometimes when you add uh, edge loops to elements like this, you will see that it creates unintentional planes for you, and so I'm trying to remove that from happening right now. I'm going to quickly start getting into some of these details on this piece because we have this like shelf, using the word shelf, but I don't really know of a better word for it right now. No, this is not ZBrush, this is Maya. I might actually add when you create that shelf. And we'll just do a quick multi-cut to connect these. You can kind of see what I was intending to get to. I can run with this for a little bit, but I'm going to have to run this all the way up this corner as well. You can kind of see where that's supposed to be going. Doing it in two waves because the actual normals are two different directions, and I'm trying to get it at the same time. Doing it at the same time would have pushed it in two different directions, or one direction that I didn't want, at least for one of them. So trying to fix that. And for this area, I'm just going to quad draw all this together so I don't have to really worry about it right now. And we'll cut all this together. So now you can kind of see that little detail in there. So we're going to keep working on that for a minute. This is the end goal here, right? That we should be having more details, more pieces here. This should be cut off. There's a lot more we should do here. Try to align it quickly. Blender's a really good recommendation for an alternative to Maya, especially if you're a student, you're interested in 3D or anything like that. Really good starting point for sure. All right. So we need to do this little piece. We might just focus on this. We got about an hour left, so trying to do something that will be informative for the stream. Also, still stay true to what the goal is. You can see there's kind of this other level here. I'm kind of bouncing back and forth quite a bit. And yeah, just trying to get this all kind of set up. I tell you, like right now, some of this is too far inwards, right? So let's say you run into this issue. What you can do is just use your soft selection. So you can hit B, hold down B, and then with your left mouse, kind of move this, right? And then I can grab that and just pull the whole thing out just a little bit. Generally, if you're very careful and you're very subtle with that, you can do slight adjustments to your model without destroying what you've done. Typically, you pose at the end. Yeah, typically you pose at the end because that's when your model is gonna be final. Unless you're doing some piece of art that's very sculptural, like you're actually making like something that's like a sculpture. I would recommend definitely posing at the end. I'm gonna delete this piece because I think that's what it should be. Let's see. You can start to see some of those details coming in now, and they're not heavy, right? They're not something that we're like really spending a ton of time on. We're kind of bouncing around between each element here, and pushing things in, pushing panels in, pulling panels out, and trying to slowly build that up to be something that we're going to add more details to, right? So this area, I might just do a little soft selection on and just pull the whole area out slightly. Then I'm going to take this, and I'm just kind of toggling this off and on to see where I should make these cuts. You can see we're starting to get a little bit of pinching in here. Me working up very slowly to do something um, that will eventually get to a final model. You see that I'm slowly spending time on each one of these things. And what's important about that is by working slowly and working your forms up slowly, you eventually get to a point where uh, you don't have a lot of pinches. I think that's one of the things that a lot of younger, intro modelers struggle with quite a bit is pinching, right? That's a very common thing in hard surface modeling and stuff like that. And I'm not really having to worry about that right now all that much because I'm not trying to make it a key. I'm not jumping into having a ton of topology. I'm focusing on little areas here and there, and then starting to worry about that later is kind of the way that I approach it, and that way I don't get into a situation where there's my whole model is full of these lumps and pinches, and I find that that often comes from wanting to get a little ahead of yourself and just start throwing in edge loops everywhere. Throwing in edge loops everywhere, trying to, um, you know, not evaluating the planes at the first level, trying to perfectly mimic a ZBrush model will result in you having planes that are lumpy. I mean, for example, Practical Effects for a really long time was doing clay sculpts of models, right? Of Terminator, of RoboCop, of anything that was created, in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s was sculpted in clay. If you ever saw any armor, right, that was very likely sculpted in clay. It wasn't machined. Um, and more recently, the past decade or two, 3D printing has taken over there because doing things in Maya and ZBrush, of course, but like doing things in Maya was far more precise. So that's why, treating this in a way of something that's should be more precise is going to result in you having a product that is cleaner. Xenothor on Twitch is asking, any thoughts on Unreal Engine 5, stating you can use ZBrush models straight into Engine? Yeah, I mean, I think that sounds cool. Um, I'd like to see it in action. I think that, it's definitely something that I think, polycounts are always going to be a thing, right? That we're always going to be, I think, still working with at a certain point. But, you know, yes, getting ZBrush models in there quicker is great, but how are you going to rig them? How are you going to UV them? How are you going to texture them? There's other questions that kind of go into that are not really applicable to that. And then kind of furthering that, um, you get it in there, and that's cool. But like, what's your goal again? A lot of this stuff to me kind of comes down to like, what's the goal of the piece that you're working on? Um, I think that maybe for environments or things that don't move, I think that's great. I think that for characters, it's not really going to change too much. All right, so we're kind of getting to this point. Decimated models are going to be the yeah. If it only works for static meshes exactly, then yeah, that makes sense. But I think for anything that's rigged and animated, it's meant to deform. I think it's not going to be a massive game changer, aside from the fact you're going to have bigger poly counts. But I may be wrong. It's hard to know. So what I'm doing now is I'm kind of laying out my topology while it has the same forms, attempting to mirror some of the underlying details. So we've got about 50 minutes left, and I think you can kind of see that, this piece here, right? This piece, okay, hang on. piece here is starting to come together as far as how this chess piece is going to look, right? But now we need to add an even further level of detail. And I'm going to do this more for example rather than what I would actually be doing. If I was going to take this whole model, which I will, to a final result, I would do everything to this level first. You know, we'll even jump into this. Like I would add some edge loops here. We needed them. Edge loops here. Edge loop across at least. Right? You know, I would take at least, I think this should probably have from here to here, an edge loop that goes down and in. See how that creates some problems when you do it as one large move. So that would need to be adjusted, absolutely. Line that up instead. Kind of, not really, huh? But it's important to kind of orbit around a lot and look at the model from all angles. So we'll put some, just put some edge loops in that we'll stamp in, kind of what this should. It was like sometimes I call this tacking, which is in welding. Like if you're welding something in metal, you sometimes will put a tack weld in, which is there more or less just to hold the object in place. And that's, you know, used to visualize what something could look like, right? So now I'm putting all these tack welds in, I'm putting all these tack edges in to simulate what the final model would be like. And this is obviously a faster process. You know, this is something that I'm just putting in right now, but it does give you a quick example of like how quickly, once you have the bulk of your stuff there, how quickly you can get to something that resembles a final result. No, we said we wouldn't focus on this, so I'll just pretend that that's not there and delete that. We just even a little tack weld on that. Right, so you can pretty quickly get to a result that's now, you know, relatively simple. Right, it's simple, but it's definitely following the retopology that we wanted it to follow. And so now we're going to push it a little bit further with some of those details. But by doing this, you know, those little welds, quote unquote, that I put in there are really easy to move. They're really easy to adjust, but they're also really great now at seeing what the model could look like in its final resolution and adding some elements to that. So that I can really quickly visualize it. Right, so now I've got something that's getting close to being final. What's the reason to crease an edge or put loops? Crease is a great tool. I prefer edge loops because I can adjust them a little easier. But what's the reason is to make it so that an edge loop doesn't smooth as smooth as it would normally. Even like this, I might just like pull this piece. Let's just have these pieces intersect, right? Pull that in there. Go along this edge, pull that in there, right? And that's just going to look a little cleaner. So now we've got all this. I'm going to do the same on the bottom here. I'm going to flare out some of these edges so it doesn't go exactly in the same normal with everything. No, I don't use bevels to add creases. Only in very specific areas. I'll add a edge loop most of the time. I find that the add bevel tool creates a lot of problems. More problems than it's worth for me. All right, so now that we've got that, we've got about 45 minutes left, so I want to add a couple of these last little details that were here. So details that I'm wanting to add. I want to create this kind of level here, some of these little details in here. And we'll see if we can get this little piece separated as well. But what I'm going to do is now that this is more or less at a quote unquote final level, it's not at a final level, but I'm saying I'm doing air quotes for sure. And I'm going to basically make a second version of this, saving a second version so that we can start working on this. And I'll give you, this is sort of like the cooking show style of like, okay, let's push this a little further. All right, so hiding this. As you can see, I don't really need this to have a lot of details in it right now. I did strategically kind of line some of that up, so I am going to add some of this stuff. Add one here. I'm just going to kill these lines here. This one can probably go away. But I do want to start more or less now mapping out these other little details. And the way I'm going to do that is just drawing them. So I know that I have this form on top. I've already kind of got this big one. So that's great. But I'm missing this one here. Right. I do have one that goes all the way down, which is not actually what it should be. So I'm not really getting the intent of that. Right. That should be one plane. So before I do that, let's just kind of get that sorted. And why is it not looking like that? I guess that's the question I need to figure out. And that's because this is going to have a little bit of a strange shape on it. Right? And right now it doesn't have that strange shape to make that plane flat. So I need to take all of this. At a certain point, and figure out where it needs to get flattened, or if that is the goal, because from here it appears to be the goal, but from here it is not the goal. So maybe it was okay. And this is where, you get into a ZBrush sculpt and you think you have everything resolved. I designed this character, I sculpted this character, but even me right now, I'm like, is that what I wanted that to be, or is that not what I wanted that to be? And that's okay to ask that, because I think it's a good part of the conversation. And that's how you get a better product. So I'm toggling all this on and off quite a bit because I want to make sure that I'm going to capture what I need here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to get this detail down here. Getting the ends for me is usually a good starting point. I go all the way to here. I'm going to go to here. There's a little lip there that I don't really want to mess with. I actually want to add that detail. Pull that out. Try to align it with this edge because I believe that's where it's going to go. Bring it here. Select these two and bridge it. So you have this. I usually use mesh fill hole on this. You can use bridge. I've seen problems where sometimes bridge will create problems. Quickly adding this, adding a holding edge there. And you'll see now we get this other little plane. Now, I might not actually need all of these little planes. Delete some of them really quickly. It's a really simple, fast detail. It's not really even a detail, it's an additional plane, but it's more like a secondary plane or a tertiary plane for what we're working on. Better just have that in-gone view there. For now, we're quickly adding this little element, this little flare to the bottom. So now I see this. I'm going to break this piece off. So I know that I have this big plane, it juts in here. I'm going to want to add another plane here, which is actually already placed here for me, which is strategic, I guess. I'm just going to delete those edges or those faces. Right? And I'm just going to use the slide tool again to start putting those in place. And I'm going to move them along their edge to where they should go. Cool. Now, me deleting those edges means that at some point I'm planning on breaking this into a couple meshes, which I am. So I'm going to add a quick edge loop here. I'm going to delete this ring. Select the ring, turn it to faces, delete it, select the ring, loop here, and pull it inside. So now that's overlapping. Right? Before, after, add a subtle edge loop here, and we'll quickly have a bit more of a detail. And this stuff starts to overlap really quickly. Right? So like I said, initially, I like to model stuff as one really large piece. So we're modeling things as one really big piece, and then we're going to start cutting that into a lot of smaller pieces. Okay? Now this has a little detail here that we can see. It looks like it kind of should be overlapping or something like that. Maybe we need this to get a little closer. That's fine. So I'll select some of these edges here, move them at the angle of what feels appropriate to them. I'll do that all around. The same thing here. So that to close that gap a little bit further. I'm going to select this, do this, delete that, right? Just delete that face. So now there's 3 there. Starting to get a little weirdness there. That's okay. I'm going to select these edges, the bottoms, this top edge. Give it a little bit of thickness. I'm going to move it kind of along its normal. So that you can view it, because I think that's important when you're seeing this stuff so it doesn't look like it's paper thin. We'll give this kind of like a final level of thickness that goes inward. You can start to get some of that little curling along the bottom. If you want, of course, add a quick edge loop there. You'll kind of start to get that piece. And all these little tiny bevels that we're adding in really do add a significant amount of highlights. And I think when you're working on a hard surface model, what you'll notice is that a highlight like these little things start to add up quite a bit. So I want to add maybe there. Means I need to add something in here. Right, and we know we have this little thing here, this little detail. So you can start to see what we're getting at here. We're going to bring in some of these elements here. Cut those in. Let's work on some of this area over here and maybe get some of these panel lines in. I think one thing, somebody just, Zenithor from YouTube said he always ends up with too complicated of topology, where they do. Um, yeah, that's, I think, this method that I like to work in. Um, you work from such a simple level to begin with that you're never really working. I should put the topology back. I think I pushed it forward. Just zero those out. Oh, just do it ourselves. Just push it back slightly, I guess. Groups and things going on here. So I'm just going to push this back to where it was. Yeah, when you start working up slowly, though, I find personally that I don't have a lot of topology issues where I start fighting, something to something that I really want it to look like. I don't really run into those issues when I work slowly up to the big, like to the final product. Sometimes when I try to work too fast, I'm like, oh, I'll try to get this done quickly or whatever it is. That's when I have more problems. So this is a very clear plane change here that is not in my model. And this is where I was kind of getting confused, like where should this be going? So what that points to me is to say that I need to break that into a couple pieces. I need to basically figure out where that's going. I'm going to trace that. So tracing, I'm kind of using, you think of it like a light box, like a traditional light box you would use in animation. I'm using this layer and just kind of turning it off and on. You could obviously turn transparency on. There's a bunch of ways you could do this whatever way you prefer. I'm seeing that this to me needs to go up a little bit right here. Getting there. So I'm going to grab that, do this, and at that point, once I'm happy with this line, and again, this is not about speed. This is about patience, and it's about um, making sure that it's working, right? Because I don't want to mess up the plane. That's why I'm not really trying to do too much there, because the plane should be the same, except when it gets here, right? This is where it all kind of breaks off. So that's why it's a little bit of a complicated section. What I'm going to do is basically just add an edge loop. So this edge loop I'm going to add is going to be the other side of this. I might, change the flow of the topology here. Right, I might bring this over, and this is where you need to start adjusting kind of your workflows and stuff. So this area here's already going to hold the plane, so I can bring this way over here. There's no problems with me doing that. And I can add another one here just to keep it steady. And at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and delete these. Now I can play with it. So I can come in here, access custom set to edge, boom. You guys see me do this whole stream. Right, push this, start pushing these shapes around. Okay. I might just do a multi-cut and add like a new piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to snap it to here. So I'm going to align it to here. Then I'm going to snap it to this vertice. But then I'm going to use that. So I know it's going along the same plane. And then we'll just, we'll deal with a little, oh, that's not what I wanted. Deal with a little triangle up here, and that's fine. Just keep the shape. And now at this point, I can take the plane that was down here. This is where the real problem was happening, right? Of saying, like, I want to make sure that this can get really tucked underneath here. See how far that should have been going in there. So the goal of why I made it like this is because I wanted this plane to be the same as this, and I only wanted it to break off from here. Do I use booleans while blocking out? No, I do not. I don't really use booleans all that often, to be honest. When Bribarian asks, when building robots and mechas specifically, what are the best core principles to stick with so that the design turns out great? Oh, that's a really hard one. I don't know about the core design principles for that. Um, I think it's more understanding what the point of your mech is, right? I did do the concept models for this, yes. I haven't been using Live Surface because it's not really valuable for me at this point because I'm using this as a reference and not something I'm trying to replicate. There's a very big difference there. All right, so now that I've got this piece, you can see that this is separate. I'll select it, go to mesh, I'll go to separate, right? Now what I'll do is kind of what you've seen before. I can do this on the whole object if you'd like. I can just extrude the whole thing inwards. Looks like my normals are reversed. I can delete that, and that'll do every single side for me. You know, I can go to this, I can go to surfaces. Sorry, that's different mesh display, reverse, right? And I can get the whole edges. The challenge is I find that often I'll spend a lot of time probably the faster way, but look at how kind of jagged these edges are, and they don't always look great. So I have to spend a lot of time fixing them. But it is a fast and efficient way of getting those extrusions quickly. And some edge loops in there. I can keep that in there. Now, when you start putting these long edge loops, if the plane is not flat, you're going to see a lot of creases in there, which can be a really big problem. So you just got to kind of pay attention to that. We're just kind of tossing these in to resolve the shape. And once I put them in, what I do, you're seeing me select and deselect, is I'm just keeping the ones that I need. Okay. So now we've got this piece and we've got this piece. This was one of the big plane changes that I wanted to make sure was there. So I'm going to add that edge loop in. I'm actually going to try to have I'm going to turn wireframe on. Should be here. Yep. So that when I add the edge loop in here, it's at roughly the same point. So those plane, like the size of that plane curve, should be roughly about the same as well, if it's there at all. I don't even know if it needs to be there on this one though. I don't actually need to do that. Cool. All right, we're getting there. We're getting there with this piece. Slide it subtly so you can see it. Maybe even having it tuck underneath is a good idea. Seeing how forms overlap can be a really valuable. I don't think they should, but it can be really good for hard surface models because generally hard surface models are mechanics, right? At their core base, they're some sort of a mechanism, and so understanding what those look like or how they interact together is a really key part of that. So let's get like this set of detail lines. Got some weird wobble here, and that I could tell there was a wobble right here. When I was moving, like light was gathering and pinching oddly here. And I can see it right here. So what I did is I selected it. I saw it was a vertice, and lo and behold, when I look at it, you can see that it's not aligned with the rest of the object, right? And so all I have to do is pull it in or out. Think of it like a dent in a car, right? You pull it in or out, and you'll start to resolve that pinch pretty quickly. All right, so we've got some of these. This and this and this are creating a little bit of a pinch there because there's a curve going on, but those are perfectly flat. So I'm just subtly bumping them. Weird line going on there, but I think it's okay. I'm going to get those things. I'm going to bring this down. Multi-cut. Take this out, unless there's a reason for it, but I don't think there was. Yeah, nothing there. Now, one element, to do this differently than we did before to show you other options. So we can go to the new model, and I can just add some transparency to it. All right, so this is our model now on top of the previous one. It's also nice when you have specular reflection so you can actually see it sometimes. We're going to add some of these deets in, and I'm just going to basically carve them in by creating lines for them. So I'm tracing them at this point using the slide edge tool. It looks like some of the design that I've created is slightly adjusted here. So I'm having to make a little audible here because this line is the detail that I want to make. But I'm noticing that that is now the peak of something. And that's pretty normal when you work this way. So I'm just going to try to capture kind of the essence of what it was doing. And then I'm going to try to capture this one as well. You can add edge flow, which is where it smooths. It'll add it'll actually adjust your edge flow to, if you have a curve on an object, it'll try to keep the curve when you add your edge flow. I find it can be helpful, but if you're working, you know, in something like this, which is somewhat specific, it can be a little difficult to maintain that. So I don't always use it. Here, what I'm doing is basically just drawing. From a topology standpoint, again, I said I don't really care about that right now, and that's the truth. I don't care about it. Um, so I'm just rerouting the topology now to kind of care about it, but to align it better with what we have here. Whenever you do cuts and details, it'll almost always look a little bit better if it's aligned with the edge flow. If you try to do something cross, doesn't work as well often. Something going on here. So I basically want to try to get this line, give it a little bit more of a standard look. Get rid of some of this. Some of these edges are starting to, there might be too many here, to be honest. So I might select some of them like this and go to, I believe it's under Edit Mesh, Mesh, Collapse. And okay, those don't want to collapse. All right, those for some reason don't want to collapse. So I will just use the target weld feature. And then I'll slide it in the middle. So we have this line drawn, right? We have, what else do we need? This one needs to be adjusted, I think, a little bit, because this one's a pretty large bevel. I think what I'll do is I'll actually just try to capture the bottom of it. There. This actually has a bevel on it that I'm going to have to capture in a little bit. You can see that there's a little difference there. That's fine. Trying to figure out how I want to do that, but I don't have an idea right now. So considering we only have 15 minutes, I'm just going to carve all these details in right now and kind of show you how I do it. It's not going to be perfect, but we'll get close. I'm going to turn the transparency back. I'm going to know that it was this line, this line, this line, this line, this line, this line, and I believe this line all the way into here, right? Which means there would probably be a really big detail line here. Right, wherever this big seam is. You're not going to manufacture a massive piece of metal like that without having a seam. And this is where I'm actually going to use bevel. I'm going to use bevel and just use a really, really small bevel like this. Now I'm going to take all these edges that I just had, and I'm going to select them. This is a fast way. There are other ways to do this. So just really quickly selecting them. If you want to spend a little time while you're doing this, it's easier to select them while you're using smooth, by the way. If you want to do it, spend a little bit of time grabbing them and making sure that everything is clean. That would probably be smart. Jump into ZBrush to make not like a weird line. What does this go? Let's go like that, right? And I'm going to I'm extruding inward, right? Or as far as it needs to go, and I'm deleting all those faces. So now you see all those lines appear, right? Deleting all those faces. Now you don't have to delete the faces. You can leave them combined. You can leave them like this. Also fine, right? But at this point, I can start adding some more of these bevels. I can start adding some more of these details and or removing them depending on what I need. These little end caps I find often are better if they get deleted. I would start connecting a lot of these little lines in the corners. If I need something here, I'll add a little line here. I might delete the rest of it for now. Right now, we're just trying to capture the essence of this. You can fix topology problems later. You know, I think that's the number one thing I see a lot in hard surface is people get a little too caught up on the what's the right way to do a model, what's the right way to do quads, what's the right way to do something, and often if you just focus on the art first and try to get that there before anything else, you'll have the best looking thing. Clean all that up later. But right now, it's not worth me spending my time to clean it up because I know it's not going to be perfect yet. Make quick adjustments to topology or whatever that seems to make sense, then that's okay. But I don't think you, at this point, you know, as you can see, that it's coming together relatively quickly. Right, so all I'm really trying to do is just visualize what the final product is. Just adding all these edges in to get to that point, to be able to visualize that. And guns don't matter, all that stuff doesn't matter, because right now, as far as a hard surface model is concerned, right, we're getting there. We're actually pretty close. The stuff now that these lines are there, right, I can start really evaluating the surfaces, and I can really start evaluating to see what it's looking like. You know, some of this is like, okay, I should add a weird panel. There's maybe a little bit of finesse work I should do here. Maybe we'll add so there's still a lot to do, as you can see, but the details that we wanted, the bulk of them are here. So I'm going to save. I'm going to hit up a bunch to select the top of the group. I'm going to pull this forward so you can see it a little bit better in comparison. And you can start to get those details, you know, start to emerge. And but you really can't do that until the planes underneath are really solid. Like what I just did, I would really not recommend to someone who hasn't spent a little bit of time making sure that the plane, the base forms, the base understanding of what's there needs to be there before you do that. Otherwise, you will screw up your model, and it will be very difficult to recover from it because you're going to spend a really long time trying to understand after you have details um, what went wrong, where it's wrong, right? Now I can start tucking things in. I can start polishing things. I can start doing, details on top of that. There's still things that need to be fixed here. Right? I didn't add in a line here. So, okay, I forgot to add in this line. Let's do that now. Add in a line and then we'll take off because we're almost over. The stream's almost over. So I'll add in this line. It's fine. We're gonna bevel that line. Now, like the edge here, like here's a quick example. If I don't slide this edge now, I'm gonna have to slide a ton of vertices later. If I don't move this vertice to be in line with that edge, I'm gonna have to move those separately as well. So I'm aligning all of these before I do my bevel. So now I can select it, save just because I'm paranoid, bevel, bring that down so it's about the same distance. Right. I can select those faces, extrude them inward. This is where extrude isn't always my favorite, so you can see how it kind of collapses on itself. Sometimes I'll just use a global scale. It's a really subtle global scale and a little bit of a move. That'll give you a less destructive sometimes result. Deleting that end cap. This is where we'll get into a little bit of weirdness. I'm going to hide the other mesh. Zoom out. So you see I created this problem. What I'm going to do is just select those two faces and I'm going to merge, target weld that together. We have that problem, or no. No, now we don't have that problem. I can run that up. Multi-cut. I have some weird floating verts in here of some kind. So I'm going to just add that. We want to add more definition to these panel lines. We can do that by by running edge loops inside of them. You see how this top one is a little soft. Like if we just run a loop inside that, it'll get nice and crisp. So we can do that on all of these if we want to. And again, this is work that I would likely spend at the end. It's not work I would necessarily recommend to do at the very beginning. Definitely, running into some issues here with like, oh, this looks like there's an extra polygon there of some kind. Troubleshooting that is very common. But you can get these details and it doesn't take forever, right? Now, one thing I do want to do with some of these is right now they just feel like they're stamped in, they're just punched in. So what I would recommend for some of these is actually to take the bottoms of these panels or these lines. Selecting them will smooth as on just because it's easier to see them. And I'm going to select the edge, as you guys have likely seen already, and I'm going to push it up. So while in smooth, you'll kind of see what this does, but it creates a slightly different look. So I can see the edge rather than it being a single parallel channel. I can either use the slide tool on this to do that. It'll do a similar technique, or I can use a move along a certain edge. And then if I'm doing that and I'm adding these edges in here and I'm creasing all these, where your poly count goes up significantly, but you'll see that the it doesn't look like it's just punched in. Like this one looks like it's a pure panel line that's punched in, and over here it looks like you can actually see where the metal would be sitting on top of the metal. So to kind of go back to the beginning of the stream and kind of what we were talking about, we started with a sculpt in ZBrush, right? And how do we get this out of ZBrush? How do we get it into Maya? How do we start making it into a final model, something that we can really have a lot of detail in, but not just detail, right? ZBrush is really good at adding detail, but adding detail with an immense amount of control. And the way we do that is we exported it, brought it in as individual decimated pieces, right? So these are pieces that are pretty low res, pretty faceted. Brought those into Maya and started to retopologize them, but not trying to mimic and perfectly mirror the shape, but try to capture the shape at its core by remodeling it, right? And I think that's something that's important to look at it when you're starting to do your hard surface models. Is if you're doing this retopology, are you trying to capture? Are you trying to perfectly retop what you already sculpted, or are you trying to remodel what you sculpted and make it better? Because certain things in here I've made better by treating it as if I'm just remodeling it and using it as a reference point. I think that's an important point to kind of call out, because I think that's it's a big thing that I see in a lot of beginners who are struggling to retop or understand the process. And I think that's because it really depends on what your goal is there. Um, we are at the end of time for the stream, so I appreciate everybody hanging with me today while we, retopologized and worked on something a little bit different than what we've been doing before. So let me know your feedback on what you think about this type of a stream. It's obviously different, right? It's not design focused. It's not as sculpting. It's not as all that kind of focused. But this is kind of a little bit different of a thing that we've been working on. Additionally, I wanted you guys to all kind of be aware that tomorrow from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Pacific time, we'll be having a virtual info session where you can hear all about Gnomon's offerings and a lot of our programs. And we'll also have a special guest, Casey McDermott, who's a senior animator at Blizzard Entertainment. He's worked on a ton of stuff in their cinematics department, from what I remember. And he's also a Gnomon alum. So if you want to hear about his experience at Gnomon, his experience working at Blizzard, and then just generally anything about Gnomon, that will be Friday, July 3rd at 11 to 1 Pacific time. So go ahead and check that out. Anyways, thank you all very much for the stream and for hanging out with me and all the good questions. Happy to keep bringing this project forward if it's something you guys would enjoy watching, the process of how this would be made. If so, let us know. And always, thanks again. And I will see you guys next Wednesday from 10 to 1 on Gnomon Art Jam.